But Daryl used to argue that people who hang around with musicians, they're called drummers. I'm not saying, Daryl said it. I didn't say that. It's one of his famous quotes around our church. You know what you call a guy who hangs around with a bunch of musicians? The drummer. But I will tell you, if your hands and feet can do what his are doing, you are officially in the musician class. Hey, Gary, before you tell your wife goodbye, how do I turn this on? Please say bye to Marilyn because she's going back to work. Bye, Mare. When you coming back? They're going to line up for kisses now. Button. Button. Who's got the button? There we go. Feet.
See you later.
All right. See ya. I decided that we would just put some slides up here just because there are things that you do to learn, and one of them is to add visuals to what you're learning. And so we've been talking about and repeating some things and coming back some things, and so I'm going to try to add some visuals as we go on through the week, just to sort of reinforce some of this stuff, because it just helps our brain to contain stuff. The preacher's greatest struggle is the 72-hour truth. The reality is that the human mind typically loses about 90% of what they heard within 72 hours. Preachers will work 20, 30, 40 hours on a sermon, and then they'll come and they'll present it, and they know that by Tuesday you will not remember much. If you remember one thing, they have accomplished something. So, repeat. Repeat. So, God is trying to get us into heaven, not trying to keep us out. Jesus is the exact image of God in human flesh, and God is for us. And if God is for us, who can be against us? All right? All right, so, well, we're going to talk about the woman at the well. And the setting this is a picture I was trying to find. In fact, up here, my phone doesn't search as fast as it does at home. And so I just see if I could find the exact date. It seems to me that this picture was drawn somewhere in the 1840s of the area around Samaria and Jacob's well. So today, if you were to go there, there's buildings and there's junk everywhere, and there's a village and there's a bunch of stuff around. But this was back before all that got developed, before people moved in there, before it became a very populous area. So in one of the groups of people who was passing through, they often would take artists because they didn't have photographers. And so they would often take artists to draw the landscapes and draw the things that they saw. And this was one of those. And we're going to be in John chapter 4. We're looking at a very famous story, the woman at the well. But I want to remember some things about her. Jesus is trying to get her into heaven, not keep her out. Got that? Jesus, as he sits there talking to her by the well, is the exact representation of God in human flesh. And Jesus is for her. Okay? You got all of that? So that's where we are with it. Let's get started with this passage. This is beginning in some of those are going to be a little hard to see. This is beginning in chapter 4, and it says, he left Judea and returned to Galilee. And Gary's computer, he'll have to fix this when he comes back. The aspect is off. And he had to go through Samaria on the way. So you get the picture. He's leaving there. He's going to Galilee. Now what happened was, according to the text, the Pharisees started hearing that Jesus was baptizing people, which wasn't a big deal, except that it meant that Jesus was gathering crowds. Okay? And when Jesus starts gathering a crowd, it always seems to bug the Pharisees. It always seems to worry them a little bit. And so, since Jesus is gathering crowds and people are starting to listen to him, it makes them a little upset, makes them a little nervous. And so Jesus leaves town. He leaves Judea and he goes north. He's going home. He's headed for Galilee. So I want you to see just a quick map of the region. Now, Jerusalem is down here. So he's down here near Jerusalem in this area. This is Judea, okay? He's going up there to the lake, Galilee. Does he have to go through Samaria to get there? No. In fact, the Bible translation that I put up there said he needed to go through Samaria. The normal path would be to go down from Jerusalem to Jericho and follow the river. It's beautiful. It's flat. It's very verdant. There's plenty of water. This is a fairly desert place. So the normal path for the average traveler would be to follow the river up to Galilee, okay? Jesus, however, needed to go through Samaria. Not because he had any geographical reason to do it. The story tells us why, tells us what the need was as we unpack it, okay? Just keep it in your mind right now. He headed north, going through Samaria because he needed to go through Samaria. He stops to rest by the well. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near a field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. So, I want you to think about this for a sec. All the ways you can sit. You ever told your child to sit up and pay attention? Right? You know what that usually means? Usually means they were doing something like this. Right? You're like, sit up and pay attention. Especially if you're a teacher. My teacher used to tell me that all the time. Sit up and pay attention. Usually that meant that I was doing this. And God now pays me to talk. Isn't that awesome? God takes your gifts, even the ones you don't recognize are gifts, uses them for his glory. So Jesus could have sat royally, regally, right? He could have sat attentively. The Bible says he sat wearily. And so it's an interesting little bit of Greek translation, which you can ignore if you want. But basically, the word simply says he was tired and he sat so. That's a real literal Greek translation. He was tired, he sat so. He sat tired. So he sat tired. You ever sat tired? You kind of, oh man, tired. You know, and you have that look, that sort of, I'm just kind of broken right now. Right, you put your hand on your head on your hand. Sit there wearily. Maybe even eyes closed. It's noonday. Middle of the day. It's noon. It's middle of the day. Now, I know if you've heard any good preachers by now, you've heard somebody say that you don't go out to the well at noon to get your water, right? Why would you go out in the middle of the heat of the day to get your water? So I want you to back up a little bit and think about this woman. Think about what's going on in her house that morning, okay? She's wrapped up. She's finished the dishes. Her husband is going off to wherever he's going for work, the fields or the shop, wherever he's going. He's getting ready to leave. And she's sitting there by the kitchen window, or standing there by the kitchen window, wrapping things up, tidying things up. She's watching the other women go by. She knows these women. She's lived in this village. She knows them. Some may have gone to school with some of them. Actually, she wouldn't have. She was a child with one of them. They wouldn't let a woman go to school. Sorry. But she knows these folks, right? And they're going by, and they're chatting, and they're having a good time, and they're carrying their water pails, and they're off they go to the well. She knows what's going on. She knows where they're going. She could join them. But she's not going to join them. That would just put too much pressure on her. She lets them go. She keeps watching out the window. She keeps watching out the window. She keeps watching out the window for them to get their water, head back. And they come back one at a time. They start coming through, a handful here, a handful there. Finally, the last one's gone. She doesn't see anybody going, so she waits a little while. You know, when you're waiting for something to be done, if you really want it to be done, you always give it a little space at the end, right? You kind of say, okay, I think it's done. I think that's done, but let's wait just a sec in case it's not quite done. And so she waits a little while. Then at noon, in the middle of the day, when surely no one else is going to the well, she heads out to the well. Okay? She breaks out through the city. She's got her jar. She gets to sight of the well, and she sees this dude sitting there. Now you got to take her impression of this. Now you got to let her speak. You got to realize she has a voice here. When she comes out of the well, out of the city, she doesn't want to see anybody. She doesn't want to see the ladies of the village. She doesn't want to see the men in the village. She certainly doesn't want to see this guy, because this guy is not just a guy, he's a Jewish guy. Man, it's enough to make you want to go back in the village. You know, if you weren't out of water, you wouldn't come to the well. If you weren't out of water, you'd just go home and wait till the Jewish guy took his nap and went from wherever he was. But Jesus needed to go to Samaria. She comes out, she sees him. Now, Jesus is sitting how? Wearily by the well. sitting wearily by the well. So she comes out. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." One of the issues with women who have been in abusive, rejected relationships is power. Control and power have been placed on them probably most of their lives, at least while these abusive things have been going on. There's a lot of power and control issues in abuse. How is Jesus sitting? Wearily. What is his first foray into the conversation? Please, can you help me? Who has the power now? She does. Isn't God awesome? We blow by these stories like, yeah, sure, you said, yeah, can I have three? No. What Jesus did, he sat wearily beside the well. He placed himself in a posture of vulnerability. And then when the woman came out, knowing the woman, being for the woman, wanting that woman to be in heaven, being on her side, being the heart of God at that well, he looks up from his hand, or his head on his hand, and he says, "Could you give me a drink?" He's handed all the authority to her. And this woman takes it. He hands the power to her. He was alone because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. Just he and her. The woman was surprised. She's surprised he's saying anything. Do you have those people in your vocabulary? Daryl knows this. I have those people. I confessed it to you the other night. I'm trying to get over it. I'm reading a book about the French. I'm trying to get over being the French being those people. And I've begun to feel like it's the Parisians that are those people, and the rest of them are probably pretty cool. But I just have this feeling like if you go to Paris, you're going to be treated badly by some snobby French people. You know? They're kind of those people. That's a real mild sort of those people. But most of us have a those people list. Right? I've given you what's easy one for me to confess. But we usually have some group. If you're from a family of alcoholics, sometimes alcoholics are those people. Right? Yeah. And those of us who are families of alcoholics, we call them drunks. We don't call them alcoholics. Somebody says, "Oh, alcoholism, it's a terrible disease." You go, "No, it ain't. Just drunks, that's what you guys are." And those people we have very little grace for. Right? I don't know who those people are. But she was one of those people. She's a Samaritan. The Samaritans are a group of people who were married into a mixed multitude of other people that were dumped there by the Babylonians back during the captivity. And so they're mixed race, Jew and something. And they were considered those people by the rest of the Jews who were so pure in their race. Have you ever read through the lineage of Jesus? Does that look like a pure race to you? But, they weren't them. They were us. We're us and they're them. It's funny how that works. Usually, those people in our mind are not as bad as we painted them. Right? She was those people. She's not only those people, she's the bottom class of those people because she's a girl. Sorry, ladies. She's a Samaritan. She's a girl Samaritan. So you drop down a peg. You're a normal Samaritan. You're just right above the floor. You're a girl Samaritan. You're on it. And then we find out the rest of her story. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. And here's Jesus sitting wearily, head on his hand, asking her for something, handing her the authority in the conversation. She said to Jesus, "You're a Jew." I love her response. I love that she takes the control being handed to her. I love that she recognizes that she's been given some power. And if you follow this conversation, she sticks with that place of authority throughout the conversation. She says, "You're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" What's the answer to this question? What's the obvious answer to this question? I'm thirsty. Right? Right? But there is such a stigma between Jews and Samaritans. There's such a stigma between men and women even talking to each other during the day. This is a big deal that Jesus is talking to her. When the disciples get back and they see Jesus talking to this woman, they're surprised. The woman says, "I can't believe you're talking to me and you're asking me for water. What's going on with you?" Jesus replied, in some ways you hate these conversations with Jesus. You know? Because she's asked a straight up question. Why are you asking me for water? And Jesus goes into this theological answer. If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. Now, put yourself in her shoes. What are you thinking now? Yeah. He hasn't had enough to drink. He's kind of gone a little crazy. It's a hot day, you know. He's lost it. You're thinking, what? What? That's no answer to my question. That's what? But if you're thinking cosmically, if Jesus is the exact image of God in human flesh, and he's sitting there wearily by the well, and she walks up, he asks for a drink, and he tells her, "If you knew who you were talking to, lady, this would be a whole different conversation." Right? That just blows her away, but Jesus has just stepped into the conversation that he's saying to her, this is not an ordinary meeting. Remember, he needed to go to Samaria. He needed to. Here's why he needed to. He makes the trip through Samaria to talk to this woman who's on the bottom rung of the bottom ladder. She's so low she might not even be on the ladder yet. And he goes through Samaria to talk to her. There is no one beyond the reach of the love of God. This little tidbit scares me a little bit, but they say that Jeffrey Dahmer converted to Christianity when he was in prison. Now I'm telling you, Jeffrey is on my those people list. People who eat other people are definitely those people. I hope they don't multiply. But according to those who spoke with him, he gave his heart to Jesus, and he might be your neighbor in heaven. Some adjustment to your neighborhood, isn't it? Heaven's going to be full of those people. Somebody's going to move in next to you and go, him? Right? Sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket. Let's get real here, buddy. You don't have a rope or a bucket, and this well is very deep. She goes right to the practical. She is still living in her humanity, living on the earth. She's still dealing with the practical issues of life. He's off. Oh, if you knew who you were talking about. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. This well's deep. You don't even have a bucket. Where would you get this living water? Besides, I like this question. Do you think this is a who do you think you are question, isn't it? Do you see her rising up to this conversation? Do you think you are greater than our ancestor Jacob who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed? You know why this well is special? Because Jacob drank here. HMS Richards drank from that well. I want to go by and just check it out because HMS Richards drank there. Oh, it's in a kind of a rough neighborhood now. It's in a neighborhood not held by the Jewish nation. It's held by the Palestinians. And every time I've gone to Israel twice now, and they don't want me to go there. I guess I have to get a different tour guide to go there. Deep well, it's cool because Jacob drank from it. Jesus, going off script again, says, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. Does she know that? Why is she at the well? Ran out of water, she's thirsty. Okay? There's a practical reality here. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. Is this good water for her to get her hands on? Yeah, this is very practical for her. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. First entrance of the idea that he's not talking about regular water. He throws in the idea that if you get this water, eternity stands there. If you were to read the previous chapter, there's a little statement being made to Nicodemus. We'll talk about it tomorrow. A little statement being made to Nicodemus. You remember what he says? You must be born of the water and of the Spirit. If you read the chapter before that, Jesus is at a wedding. There's this moment when they run out of wine. The chief, leader of the wedding talks to his mom. So somebody knows Jesus has been doing some interesting stuff. Okay? We don't know what happened between 12 and 30, but apparently something happened that made people think he could make an impact on this wedding. And so they get these huge jars. They're actually there for cleansing. They're big jars of water. They're actually for ritual cleansing. And he says, fill them up with water. When they're full, they take a scoop out and they're full of wine. Water, water, everywhere water. Those first 3 chapters. Interesting. There's some good theological conversation to be had around the dinner table. Just kind of, why is all this about water going on in the first 3 chapters? We're not going to go there. Gary can explain that later because I'm pretty sure Gary can explain stuff. Verse 15. Please, sir, the woman said. Now he has something she needs. Okay? So now the please is on the other foot. Please, sir, the woman said, give me this water. Then I will never be thirsty again, and I won't have to. What is her practical need? I won't have to come here and get water. Give me some of that so I don't have to come through this embarrassment every single day. In Africa, we started drilling wells a few years ago. We started drilling wells near churches. So we would build a church and drill a well, build a church, drill a well. Okay? And the churches that we were building, we were designing them so that they would be an Adventist church on Saturday, they would be a community center the rest of the week, and there would be an opportunity for us to use them for clinics. Okay? And they drilled a well next to them because where does everybody have to go? To the well. So it was a great idea. They thought, wonderful idea. And then they started to get complaints from the women. Now, a lot of these wells were a great distance. Some of them 4 hours away, these women would have to walk, or 2 hours away. They'd go 2 hours there and 2 hours back. 4 hours of their day wasted going to get water. So we thought. What we discovered is that this was the only time of the day these women were getting away from their husbands and their kids. We're leaving the kids with daddy and taking a 4-hour walk. This was mommy time. We didn't know. We thought, look, we'll make a convenient thing. We'll put the well right in the middle of the city. They'll have like a 10-minute walk to get water. No, they didn't want a 10-minute walk to get water. They wanted 4 hours away from the kids and daddy. Now the culture's adjusting and things, but it's weird, isn't it? What we don't understand is that morning ritual for all the people in the village was connection time for these ladies. Going out to the well, talking, visiting, getting the water, helping each other, fill their jugs, carrying the jugs back in. This was connection times for the ladies in the village. She was outside that. And every day that she had to go back to the well was a reminder that she was outside. That she wasn't part of the group. She was those people in the midst of those people. Jesus then says, go get your husband. Does he know what's up? Go get your husband. The woman replies, I don't have a husband. Jesus said, You're right. They think about that conversation. Go get your husband. I don't have a husband. You're right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You've certainly spoken the truth. Now, before we walk by this, I want you to think about what it means to have been rejected by all of these men. Because she couldn't get a divorce. She didn't go to the town council and get a divorce. These guys did. Over and over and over again. She gets married. She's probably a young bride. She has that gleam in her eye. There's that hope on the horizon. This is going to be a great thing. She marries this guy. They live together who knows how long. He throws her out. She's been rejected once. She remarries. Hope rises again. This guy maybe is going to be different. Maybe life will be different with this one. He throws her out. She marries a 3rd time. By the 3rd time, I don't think she has as much hope. I think she's just, it's what we do. We get married. He throws her out. She marries a 4th time and a 5th time, and each time she's been rejected by a man. And now you wonder why she's upset about running into this Jewish guy at the well? All of her experiences with men have been bad. Over and over and over and over. Heartbreak, sadness, rejection. And the woman is probably living in the same village with these 5 dudes and their new wives. Now before you leave, man number 6, who isn't married to her, let's take him for a moment. He's living in a village with these 5 guys as well. And he's married to the girl, or not married, just living with the girl, who 5 other guys have kicked to the curb. What's his self-esteem like? So what are things like around their house in the evening when they're having supper? There's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of sadness in this home. And here's Jesus. He needed to go to Samaria. Sitting by the well. His head on his hand. Waiting for her to come and get some water. Because he's on her side. He wants her to understand that not every male she ever runs into in the world is like this. He wants her to understand that he desires for her to be in heaven. He wants to begin to redeem her life. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Best definition of Adventism in the scriptures, by the way. He has come to this woman who is so far from ever having experienced anything abundant in her life. He's turning it. Go get your husband. I don't have a husband. You're right, you don't. I know your story, sweetie. And I'm still here. And I'm still talking to you. I know what your life has been like. And I'm still talking. You know, sometimes if the church would just stay in the conversation when we learn the bad news, it would change everything. When somebody opens their nasty closet wide to you, and you get a glimpse of how rough things have been, if we will just stay in the... You don't have to know what to say. You don't have to have a verse for it. You don't have to have a prayer for it. You just need to be there. Just listen to the story. Just let him open it up and let it out. Most of us have passed by this as if she was some kind of loose woman. You know, most of us read this and we think, 5-time divorcee, she can't keep a husband. Right? Now, we've run that through our head. It's not the case. This is a woman who 5 husbands have not been willing to keep. I don't know what she was like. She may have been horrible to live with. But 5 rejections is a lot of pain. It's a lot of pain. And she can't get the dude she's married to now to actually sign on the dotted line she's living with now. So the woman said, "You must be a prophet. So tell me," I like this, "you had 5 husbands, one you're with, now it's not yours. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist on Jerusalem as the only place where we can worship?" What is she doing? Change the subject. I don't want to talk about that. Too much pain. Let's change the subject. So she starts a theological argument. You ever seen that happen in church? Yeah, man. We start getting into some heavy stuff. We change the subject. Let's talk about Sabbath observance. Let's talk about veganism. Let's talk about exercise. Let's talk about anything but something else that I don't want to talk about, right? You're talking about, are you not going to fall in love with Jesus? Are you not going to give your life to Jesus? Let's talk about, I don't know, something else. Anything else. She says, you know what the controversy is around here? It's whether we should worship in Jerusalem or here in Samaria on Mount Gerizim. Now, a little bit of historical background. When the 10 northern tribes split off, they built 2 temples because they didn't want their people going down to Jerusalem. It connected them to their southern neighbors and to the other 2 tribes. So they built 2 of them, one up in Dan and one here at Gerizim, so they were nice, local, easy to get to, okay? By the way, God was not in favor of that, in case you didn't know. The one in Dan is still there. It's very cool, actually, to go see it. The ruins of a temple built pre-Jesus, like 600 years before Jesus, still there. Still there. If you go to Israel, Dan is not on the usual route. Ask to go to Dan. Was Dan not worth it? Daryl and I went to Dan together, too. Weren't you talking about Hezekiah's tunnel? Daryl and I went through there together, too. Hezekiah's tunnel is not very big. Your shoulders rub on both sides in some spots. So you just have to suck it up and go because it's well worth it. Sorry. But there was a temple on Mount Gerizim. There was one up in Dan. They said, look, our ancestors have worshipped here on this temple for half a millennium. What's the big deal with Jerusalem? Why do we have to go down to Jerusalem? She's changed the subject. She doesn't want to talk about the pain. She doesn't want to talk about the husband thing. She's moving on. She's got something else. She's in control of the conversation. Jesus replied, believe me. And some of your Bibles will say woman. Okay? Now, the Greek construct can tell you whether or not that's a woman or dear woman. When Jesus speaks to his mother and he calls her woman, it's this construct. It's dear woman. Okay? Jesus isn't disrespectful to his mother, and he's not disrespectful to this woman. He's not adding that edge to this. He is saying, dear woman, dear woman. The time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. What does Jesus know is about to happen? He's about to rip out the underpinnings of Judaism. He's replacing it with Christianity. It isn't going to matter whether you go to the temple anymore. Okay? And in 70 years, the temple's not even going to be there. Okay? You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. Now, he's saying you worship God, right? You don't know much about him, but you do worship God. Okay? We Jews know a lot about him. Salvation comes through the Jews. In fact, it's me. But the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father how? In spirit and in truth. In spirit and in truth. Really interesting. Now remember, Jesus needed to go to Samaria, right? He was looking for someone. He went there intentionally. He needed to go to Samaria. And then he says, the Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. You know where he's looking? By a well in Samaria at noon when this gal's coming out. God is looking for people who will worship him in spirit and in truth. Would you have picked her? Be honest. Is she on the top 5 list? The top 20 list? She's not making anybody's list, is she? But she made God's list. Because God isn't looking at her history or her outside. He's not looking at how other people look at her. He's looking at her heart. He's looking at this moment in her life, and he knows that right now she is ripe for the picking. He will say, the fields are white for the harvest, and this is Exhibit A. He's come to Samaria for a reason. He needed to go to Samaria because the Father is looking for those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And person number one is her. 5 husbands, living with a guy she's not married to, out at the well at noon because there's no other time she wants to be there. Here's Jesus saying, let's change the direction of your life. Isn't that awesome? God is for her. And if God is for her, who? Not the Fab Five can be against her. Not the ladies in the village who don't want her around their husbands because she collects them can be against her. Not her Samaritan upbringing. Not her own misunderstandings. God is for her. And he's trying to point her in a different direction. What is he looking for? And I want to just take a slight tour into this. God is spirit. Those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. We shortcut this. We use this as a proof text, and we miss so much of what's here. We throw this out there, and we say, yeah. This is about worshiping God spiritually and worshiping God with the information that's in the Bible. You can imply that, but that's not the main point. He's already told us she doesn't know what she's talking about. You don't have much truth. But he's still talking to her about worshiping in spirit and in truth. So let me unpack it if I can just a little. To worship in spirit, it's a spiritual act. Worship is a spiritual act. You buy that? Worship is a spiritual act. You can't worship outside of spirituality. To worship outside of spirituality is doing something else. It's pretending, which, by the way, is what the third commandment is about. It is not about cursing. Do you know the third commandment is not about cursing? The third commandment is about pretending. It's about faking it. It's like taking the Lord's name in vain. It's pretending to be a follower of Jesus and not actually doing it. Not taking his heart, not taking conversion. It's faking it. That's what the third commandment's about. There's other places where the Bible talks about not using coarse language, and so you're not. Don't worry about that. You're not supposed to. But this one is about faking your Christian experience. He's saying, don't do it. You know why? Who does that help? No one. Everybody knows you're fake, and even you know you're fake. There's no salvation in fake Christianity. It's a spiritual act to work. It's motivated by the Holy Spirit, and the truth is engaging you completely. So to be motivated by the Holy Spirit and be completely engaged, worship in spirit and in truth. Love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. Completely in. Completely engaged. Everything you got is on God. Everything you got is headed his direction. You are worshiping completely, moving completely toward God. You remember the story, or remember the picture in Romans chapter 12 of this? It said, let yourself, because of God's mercies, therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living, holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. I've given you a translation of the New American Standard that pulls out that last verse, because some of your texts will say, which is your spiritual service. Some will say your spiritual act of worship. It's actually implying both things. It's a service, it's a spiritual act of service, and it's worship. Completely, 100%, fully surrendered to God. When you fully commit, fully surrender to God, that's a spiritual act. We can't do that by ourselves. Motivated by the Spirit, moved by the Spirit, completely surrendering. That's spiritual. Completely spiritually committed to God. 2 men went into the temple to pray, worshiping in truth. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people. Those people. Robbers, evildoers, adulterers. You know how the prayer starts for the Jewish male? Dear Lord, thank you that I was not born a Gentile or a woman. So he's not off base for this culture. Or even like this tax collector. You ever look across the room at church and realize there was some of those people present? Should there be? You shouldn't have a classification like that. I'm working on my French. You need to work on yours too. Even like this tax collector, I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all that I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Let me ask you a question. Was the Pharisee a sinner? Did he need mercy? Did he need forgiveness? Did he get it? You know why? He didn't ask. You know, we have to be careful not to condemn the Pharisees and just become a bunch of, as one preacher said, we become a bunch of prostitutes with a Pharisee thrown down in the middle of the crowd and stones in our hands. The Pharisee is in the same situation. God is trying to get him into heaven. The Jesus he looks at is God. And God is for him. But he can't reach him because he's not asking. Remember what he said to blind Bartimaeus? What would you have me do for you? It's what he says to the Pharisee when he walks in that day. When he woke up, when his eyes opened, he said, hey, man, what can we do for you today? He said, I don't need anything. I'm good. You know what Laodicea's problem is? They don't need anything. We're good. When in reality, they're wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. That's a rough place to be. There are 5 of them, by the way. I tell you the truth, Jesus said. This man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. To worship in spirit is to be motivated by the Spirit to give everything, to be surrendered completely, to come to God completely holy yourself, spiritual, motivated completely by him, and to be honest and truthful, completely honest with him. You see, to worship in truth is more than worshiping truths. The Pharisee had the truths, right? But the woman at the well is about to get honest. And the transformation possible when that honesty goes before God is what makes all the difference in the world. I'm not saying you shouldn't have truths. It's a whole lot better than being ignorant. But I'm saying this text is saying, speak honestly to me. Come before me honestly. Back at the well, another dodge. The woman said, I know the Messiah is coming. Right? He says, God is looking for people who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And she says, I know the Messiah is coming. So she's an Adventist. Correct? Isn't that what the Adventist means? An Advent is somebody looking for the Messiah. This woman is an Adventist, Samaritan Adventist. It's one of those people groups. I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called the Christ. When he comes, he'll explain everything. She's trying to get out of this conversation, isn't she? She is trying to zip this baby up and leave because she's getting uncomfortable with the guy who knows about the 5 husbands and the guy she's married to now, and who's telling her God is wanting you to worship him in spirit and in truth. He's wanting you to be honest with him. He wants you to talk about this whole deal. God wants into your closet. She's like, okay, well, the Messiah is going to come. When Jesus gets here, he'll settle everything. It'll be cool. Everybody will know everything they need to know. Jesus said, Greek, he says, ego eimi. I am. The rest of this passage is, I am he who speaks to you. In other words, the one who speaks to you is God. The ego eimi is the Greek version of God saying to Moses, I am who's speaking to you. When Jesus uses this language, he is declaring himself to be God. I am. That's why this translator says, I am the Messiah. When the language says, I am the one who is speaking to you. In other words, the one who is speaking to you is the one you're looking for. Isn't it crazy who Jesus tells that he's the Messiah? He doesn't go to the king. He doesn't go to the leading Pharisees. He doesn't go to the big guys around town. He is in Samaria at a well talking to a woman that nobody in town wants to talk to, and he tells her that he's the Messiah. Wow. You know why? Because he'd like to see her get to heaven. Because he's representing the heart of God, and he's for her. I am the Messiah, and I've come to Samaria. I needed to come by this well today because I was looking for you. It is my belief that the character of God is represented in the actions of Jesus. And in this story, I know that he reaches to the bottom of the culture. Right? Because here's a woman who's rejected even in her own Samaritan village. And the story goes great from here. The disciples come back and they're blown away that Jesus is talking to this woman. She forgets her water, goes into town and starts telling everybody. You know what's wild? Is this woman who nobody wants to talk to gets the whole town to come out and see Jesus. You know what's crazy? Is that works almost every time. It is. I used to have a lady who came to my church. She would gather folks from the bar. She would show up and she'd have a whole back row full of people who had never been in church before. One of these guys, big, tall, lanky truck driver guy. Maybe hard for you to believe, but I'm kind of a hugger guy. And he comes in the back of the church. And he had been there like 2 or 3 times. So I'd recognize him. I spoke to him, called him by name, and then I hugged him, And I just, I went for it. Both arms. A typical hug, male hug is this. It's 3 pats and a break. It's like a wrestling move or something, right? But I gave him the full-on, hold you, squeeze you, man hug. Didn't think anything of it. He went to his chair. End of the service, he was crying. I had preached. It wasn't that good. And I met him in the foyer, and I said, are you all right? He said, I haven't been hugged in 30 years. They're out there. They should be in here. And it takes us declassifying them as those people to start representing the heart of God to the world around us. To start looking at the people who are hurting as people who are hurting, whom Jesus died for. To look into the eyes of anyone, anywhere, and see them differently. To see them as of such value to God that he sent his only begotten Son to die on the cross so that their sins would not have to kill them. Just to give them an opportunity to make a decision to follow him. It's going to take a move in the church to win the world. And it's going to take us recognizing the value of the woman at the well. The woman who's got 5 guys living in the village. Maybe in your church. The woman who's been through 2 or 3 of the guys in the church and is still showing up, and you're all like, oh, I don't know what to say to her. They're sitting on that side, she's sitting on that side, and you're going, oh man, I wish they wouldn't all come at once. Maybe we should start a second service. It's going to take going over and sitting by the one who's crying and saying, what's up? Last story, I promise. There's a guy named Eric in our church. Eric had been in another church, and he had had a rough experience there. Unfortunately, with the pastor and some of the leaders in the church, it just had not gone well. And I don't know what his part was and what their part was, and I don't care. I just know for him it was painful. And so he left the whole deal, and he was gone for a while. And people hear about our church. It's a little bit odd. It's a different kind of a church. And people hear about our church sort of on the grapevine, and they come to see. They just come to see if it's safe. So Eric sat back there. And he sat back there by himself, didn't talk to anybody. Shaved head, tough-looking dude. Nobody talked to him either. So I saw him back there. I went back, said hello, got his name, disappeared, didn't come back for a couple weeks, came back, sat back there. This went on. Eventually he brought his wife. Two of them sat there together. He would drop in and out, drop in and out, drop in and out. A year and a half goes by. I know him. I know another guy who knows him. Maybe 2 or 3 people. We have a class after our sermon. We preach first and have class afterwards. And so our discipleship classes, our Sabbath school classes are after church. And so we get to have the conversation you have around the lunch table about the sermon, about how terrible the guy was. We get to have that in church right in front of the pastor. And we were talking about a safe place to belong. We were talking about trying to make this the kind of place where it was safe to be yourself, to be accepted, to be loved, to be cared about. And so I preached about that where class was talking about that. Eric is sitting right there, and I'm standing right there. And I always told the people who are in the front, you got to turn to talk to the people in the back so people can hear you. So he turns to the group, actually turned his chair like this. He did not sit wearily. He sat up straight. And he said to them, I've been coming to this church for a year and a half. Nobody here wants to know me. Right? None of you want to know who I am. He said, you're not talking to me, you don't come up to me, you're not friendly to me. And I'm just dying. I'm over there choking to death on all of this. And I don't know how these people are going to respond. I don't know if they're going to go, well, you're mean looking and crazy and we don't want to talk to you. I don't know what they're going to say. What ends up happening, however, is people say, we're sorry. That's all. That's all he needed. He needed to know they recognized their mistake. Half a dozen guys at the end of that deal started chatting with him. You know what I found out? Eric's got a son. Showed up with his son now that it was safe. Brought his wife and his son. And now that he had a family, it was different. It's happening in your church. If it isn't, it should be. If it isn't happening, if people who are hurting are not coming to your church, you need to clean up your church. It's dangerous. You need to make it a safe place for somebody who's had 5 husbands. And the man she's living with now doesn't want to marry her. To come and find that life doesn't have to be like this. You see, this is what it's supposed to be. This is how it's supposed to work. It's not just that God is trying to get us into heaven, not keep us out. Church is supposed to be out trying to get us into heaven, not keep us out. We spend a whole lot of time talking about the things that will keep you out and very little time in most churches talking about how to get in. I've had people in my church come to me over the years. I've been a pastor for over 30 years. People come to me and they say, tell us how to be ready for the second coming. You're not preaching about the events at the end of time. We need to know the events at the end of time. I said, no, you don't. You're just going to mess that up anyway. You've seen the charts. The charts are all different. Nobody actually knows all the events. But you know what you have to know to be ready for the second coming? Jesus. You got to know who's coming. It doesn't really matter if you get the events messed up if you know who's coming. You can look expectantly into the heavens and him not show up and you go, okay, I'll look for tomorrow. It's okay. We spend a lot of time talking about the stuff and not the person. The church is supposed to be a place where we're trying to get people into heaven, not keep them out. Man, if somebody shows up with a bucket of chicken in your potluck and you've never eaten chicken in your life, take a drumstick. You know what you do with potluck food that you don't want to eat? You slide it around a little bit and you toss it. You've eaten the old lady's casserole. You've tasted and gone, oh, man. You start covering stuff with your napkin. You can do this. You laugh because it's true. You visit somebody's kitchen and you say to your husband, don't eat that, ladies. No, the dog sleeps on the counter. Potluck is an act of faith. The church is supposed to be the exact image of Jesus Christ in human flesh. Did you know that? You and I, we're supposed to be like Jesus. When people come in, they're supposed to bump into Jesus at the church. In us. Not your preacher. He's trying too hard. You. Everybody expects the preacher to be a little holy. So he gets no credit for holiness. He gets no credit for even kindness most of the time. Now, if he's not, there's problems there too. But it's the average person. I got no credit for meeting this guy. When he says, nobody here wants to be my friend, I'm thinking, we are supposed to be the place trying to get people into heaven. We are supposed to be the exact image of Jesus in human flesh. We are supposed to be for people. You get it? Then let's pray. Father in heaven, first of all, clear up those people in our lives. Just help us to give grace to whoever the friends are in our experience. Lord, I am sorry for my frustration with those folks. And I pray for a change in my life and my heart. I pray that you would make our churches safe places for your children, wherever they find themselves, whatever circumstance they're in. That they can walk into the church, put their cigarette out on the sidewalk, and be loved by the greeter and the first person they sit next to and the last person they talk to. Pray for a transformation in the church. Lord, our world's a mess. Let our church not be. Teach us to love our neighbor as ourselves, and to consider anyone you bring to us our neighbor. In Jesus' name I pray.